experts from the world of forestry and the world of climate change and the world of development finance to take a look at REDD+ finance and try to understand the experiences to date, but in particular, why we have not been successful in mobilizing more finance overall, but also specifically why so little of that finance has been on a payment for performance basis. So our purpose will be to share the findings from that working group, which are contained in this report, and we have extra copies if anyone would like to take one away. If you don't have one on your chair, there's extra copies on this table here. And after a brief presentation of the findings of the report, we will have a talk show style panel discussion with some experiences that are relevant from other countries and discuss in particular how this might be relevant for Indonesia. I will announce the other panelists when we move to that part of the agenda. So for now, I will invite to the stage my colleague, Jonah Busch, who is also a fellow at the Center for Global Development, and he is going to introduce the findings of the working group report. And while he comes to the stage, let me recognize Juliana Santiago, who is a member of the working group, who is not on the panel this afternoon, but is encouraged to participate in the discussion once we move to that. Smile and wave, Juliana. Okay. Jonah.
Thank you, Francis. Selamat sore, Bapak-bapak dan Ibu-ibu, distinguished delegates. Thank you for being here for this presentation today on early experiences and opportunities for results-based finance to support reduced deforestation. My presentation is based on 3 publications by the Center for Global Development. The first, called Cash on Delivery, a new approach to foreign aid, that emphasizes the importance of shifting development finance towards results, towards outcomes in education or health or forests. The second is this report of the working group that Francis described. And the third is a book forthcoming next year by Francis and myself called Why Forests, Why Now? On the science, economics, politics, and finance of tropical forests for climate and development. The main messages of today's presentation are 3. First, tropical forests offer a large and cost-effective way to slow climate change with many side benefits. Second, finance for REDD+ to date has been too low, too slow, too aidified, and not sufficiently focused on payment for performance. And third, in order to maintain momentum in forest-rich countries, new ways of transferring funds and new sources of finance are needed, which I'll describe. So we're here at COP21, and for those of you following along with the negotiations, you'll have seen that in the most recent draft in front of the ministers, there is a paragraph encouraging reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, plus enhancing forests. This is a very, very good thing because, as most of you here know, tropical deforestation, if it was its own country, would be the 3rd largest emitter on the planet. And then, if on top of that you added the potential to mitigate climate change by reducing forest degradation and growing back forests, this bar would be even further to the right. It would be larger than China. So truly a critical component of reaching the goals of this convention. Not only that, but reducing deforestation is one of the most cost-effective ways to fight climate change. My research with my colleague Jens Engelmann showed that globally reducing deforestation costs less than a quarter of what it would cost to achieve the same results taking mitigation actions in Europe and in the United States. The result of that is, by including forests in this agreement, we can reach a cooler planet. We can get to 2 degrees or even it seems 1.5 degrees, we can do so more cheaply, and we can do so quicker. The world's emissions can peak 3 years sooner in 2025 rather than 2028 by including the cost-effective potential of tropical forests. As if that was not enough, tropical forests are a very attractive climate mitigation option because they're so good for the people who live in and around them. Tropical forested watersheds help the hydroelectric dams that are downstream produce more electricity, and they provide cooler, fresher air on continental scales so that farmers can grow more food. The destruction of tropical forests contributes to drought, as the Brazilians in the audience are aware, and as all of you know more acutely than I do, in Indonesia, when forests are burned, it's creating a truly catastrophic public health emergency. So for all these reasons, rich countries of the world should be strongly supportive of efforts to reduce deforestation. And they should do so through performance-based finance. There's a lot of reasons why finance should be performance-based. One is that there's a financial incentive for governments to enact and enforce policies in the face of very large commercial pressures to convert land for palm oil, for beef, for soy, timber, other commodities. But research by my colleagues William Savadoff and Rita Parakis has shown that the non-monetary benefits of performance-based finance can have just as large an effect. Often, this has the effect of focusing attention of many officials from across different agencies around a single target, increasing transparency and accountability. Performance-based finance is good because it's no strings attached. It is a way for recipients to retain flexibility and ownership over the agenda. Donor countries can get out of the kitchen. And it should be simpler. It avoids detailed plans and receipts tracking. If a country produces emission reductions, they receive payments. That's the very simple idea. And all of this fosters a spirit of equal partnership. And so, despite the very good reasons for rich countries to be paying for tropical forests in a performance-based way, the experience of the last decade has been that the finance has only been about $1 billion a year, and more than half of that has actually been traditional funding for inputs. Less than half has been for performance-based, for outputs. The blue stack on the left is inputs, the orange stack on the right is outputs. And with the recent announcement last Monday by Germany, Norway, and the United Kingdom, the funding will stay at about its current level of about $1 billion a year, and it should shift slightly toward the orange column on the right. Now, even within these orange boxes that are nominally payment for performance, what we've seen is there are quite a few strings attached. This is the carbon fund of the Forest Carbon Partnership Facility. This is the long and winding road that a forest country would have to go through in order to receive performance-based payments at the end. So not as simple as just reducing emissions and receiving money. And when I first saw this diagram, I thought to myself, I know I've seen this somewhere before. And then I remembered where I'd seen it before. As a child, I used to play snakes and ladders, and I understand that this game is played by Indonesian children as well. It's called Ular Tangga. And in order to get to that treasure at the top, you have to go through an awful lot of snakes. So there's too many snakes, and there's not enough ladders. And this has real consequences. It's funny, but it has real consequences. This is another member of our working group, Harrison Carnwea, who leads Liberia's Forest Development Authority. And he said to this COP last week, it's time to hurry up. the longer it takes, referring to red finance, the more enthusiasm dies away in the face of logging pressures. And of course, we know that Harrison is not alone. There are about 50 countries that are trying to get to performance-based finance for forests, and only about 5 or 6 of them are even as far along as Harrison's country, Liberia, in having signed an agreement. So this was the situation into which Center for Global Development entered with the working group that Francis described earlier, so I won't describe the working group again. I will give 3 slides on what the working group did and found. And as you can see, this is a very thick, meaty report filled with many, many recommendations and suggestions. I will just choose them selectively. I won't go through all of them. And I should say also, not everyone on the working group agreed with every single word in the report, but it's what we thought was the sense of the room. So, first is diagnosing the problem. How did we get to this situation where we are today? As we know, the international carbon market that many had anticipated and hoped for in Copenhagen did not materialize. And so REDD Plus is funded entirely out of public aid budgets. With aid comes aid politics. You get funding fads. You get traditional ways of moving money. And you get a lot of conditionalities. So donor agencies face different type of pressure than, let's say, an offset purchaser, a regulated utility in the United States or California would. Donor agencies want to move money. That's how they're scored by their superiors. It's how fast they can push money out the door. So they don't want to wait around for an uncertain future where results may or may not materialize. Donor agencies often have long traditions of working cooperatively in countries. They have established programs and they have established beneficiaries of those programs who are advocates for the status quo, either within donor governments or in recipient countries. And so there's an emphasis, we might think an overemphasis, on readiness. And third, when money is channeled through donor agencies, they're very averse to headline risk. They don't want to be in the media associated with allegations of corruption or rights violations in the forests. And so the result of that are well-meaning, but often very elaborate conditionalities. Conditionalities on how results are achieved, which slows down the process, and conditionalities on how money is spent after the results are achieved, which again can slow disbursement. So what should be done about this problems? Here are a few of our recommendations. The first is a change of mindset. Tropical forest conservation is not a charity because rich countries, indeed everyone on the planet, gets something in return in the form of a cooler climate. And so the mindset should shift from charity to payment for a service. Second, there should be a shift of funding from readiness to results. Of course, some funds are still needed up front. We know that, but the finance options should be more about borrowing against the expectation of future results through bonds or loans, and that currently is the case. Also on here, there should be minimization of conditionality of how results are achieved. The risks are real, we know that, but there should be a spirit of trust, there should be an agreement on principles, there should be a reliance wherever possible on countries' own systems for minimizing risk, there should be reporting, and then if those principles are respected, the payment goes forward. And finally, there should really be a minimization of conditionality on how funds are used. If I buy oil that comes from Saudi Arabia, if I buy beef that comes from Brazil, if I buy batik that comes from Indonesia, I never ask what the person who made that product is going to spend their money on. The same should be true when I buy carbon. My last slide is this. We know the money has to be channeled. The methods for channeling the money need to be improved, as I showed on the last slide. But finance needs to be scaled up. $1 billion a year is not enough for the forest agenda. The $1 billion for Indonesia is not enough when the palm oil industry has 20 or 30 times that amount each year. So where can more money come from? One is we recommend scaling up public financing. One way this could happen is through a red REDD plus window in the Green Climate Fund. We advocate also for jump-starting private financing, which we know will only really take off once there are compliance markets, and those compliance markets for very ambitious mitigation in rich countries allow for offsets. California has gotten the ball rolling on this process. I was at a very encouraging meeting in Sacramento in October where this is happening. And there's signs that the International Civil Aviation Organization could go down this road as well. We proposed several new instruments, but I won't go into them here because we have such a great panel, so I'll leave it to you to explore them in this book. So just to recap, tropical forests, a large, cost-effective way to slow climate change with many co-benefits. Finance for REDD to date has been too low, too slow, and too datafied, and we have many recommendations for how to transfer the funds better and have more funds. This is so important because if we do this right, we will conserve forests, we will reduce climate change, we will all live in a cooler and safer planet. Thank you very much.
Thanks to Jonah, and I'll invite Jonah back up to the stage when we get to the question and answer part of the agenda. But now let me invite panelists for the talk show section of the program to please take seats on